Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to the second webinar in our series, Housing 2.0, New Perspective for Latin America and the Caribbean. I would like to begin by thanking our co-organizers, the Urban Housing Practitioner Hub, as well as our partners at IDB, with the collaboration of Urban Transitions and Global Covenant of Majors for Climate and Energy in making this event possible. Housing 2.0, New Perspective for Latin America and Caribbean, is a series of 5 virtual exchanges that highlight alternative models and responses that seek to address new social, economic, and demographic demands through innovation, sharing global insights, and lessons learned for the Latin America and Caribbean region. We would like to express our sincere appreciation to all the policymakers, practitioners, researchers, and multilateral partners who joined us for this second webinar, Systems and Models. How is the housing of the future built? Your active participation, valuable insights, and shared experiences will greatly enrich the discussions and contribute to advance our collective understanding on how to make housing system more inclusive and effective. To begin this second webinar topic, let me introduce you Marta Fernandez, Senior Investment Officer for Corporates IDB Invest, that will be moderating today's session. Welcome, Marta.
Hi, Paloma. Welcome, everybody. Good morning. Thank you. For me, it will be a great honor to moderate today's session. This second webinar will explore how innovation in construction can transform the housing sector by integrating technology, sustainability, and social inclusion. The session will examine practical pathways for scaling innovative systems and materials that reduce costs, carbon emissions, construction times, while improving resilience and access to housing. The housing sector is facing growing pressures from climate change, rising construction costs, and the acceleration of urbanization. Traditional methods are struggling to meet demand efficiently, sustainably, and affordably. In response, a new generation of technologies, including 3D printing, modular systems, and regenerative materials, is redefining what it means to build housing in the 21st century. This transformation goes beyond technology. It questions how innovation can scale, adapt to local contexts, and align with financial, regulatory, and social frameworks. The challenge is to move from isolated pilot projects to a systemic adoption, ensuring that innovation serves not only productivity, but also resilience, inclusion, and environmental goals. At IDB Invest, we are committed to supporting private sector players that are developing and promoting this type of initiative with both financing and non-financial solutions. Today's webinar has a rich and diverse agenda. We will begin with a keynote presentation by Sam Stacy, who will share global lessons on construction innovation. This will be followed by a panel discussion featuring Niels van den Berg, Melissa Ferro, and Philip Lund Nielsen, offering their diverse experiences of working on innovative materials and construction systems. We will then move to case studies from Portugal and Chile to see practical examples put into place in several countries. Finally, we will close with several reflections on innovation pathways for Latin America and the Caribbean, drawing connections and insights to foster future action in the region. So let's start. We are honored to welcome Sam Stacy. He is a construction industry leader with over 25 years of experience delivering complex, high-value projects across public and private sectors. He has served on various boards, including the BRE, Construction Innovation Hub and Active Building Center, and advised the UK government and a number of leading construction companies. In the past, he has served as Innovation Director at Skanska UK PLC, where he drove research, business improvement, and design management. He has also been a policymaker, most recently as Challenge Director for Transforming Construction at UKRI. He is now continuing to implement his vision via Stacy X International. Sam, welcome to the webinar. We're very happy to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Marta, and nice to see you all. I'll share my screen and get going. Yes, I'm going to talk to you about my experience leading construction strategy for the UK, but I think a lot of the lessons and experiences will resonate with Latin America and the Caribbean as well. Very much common challenges. Marta's already introduced me very effectively, but just to reiterate some of that, I did run the implementation of the UK's industrial strategy for construction when it was a specific program, and that was 2018 to 2022. It was known as the Transforming Construction Challenge. And I had a reasonable budget, the government budget of £170 million. And we had investment of about double that, I would say, 300 or 400 million from the private sector to contribute to that. And the outcome of that was a set of policies and case studies and so on, which I'll talk about a little bit more. Prior to that, I'd spent 8 years as Director of Innovation and various other things at Skanska, which is a very big Swedish-based contractor. So I got to see what was happening in different parts of the world, Scandinavia, USA, Eastern Europe, and so forth. So I got a good overview of innovation across the world in terms of construction. I've always been a built environment guy, so I started out studying architecture. That was Cambridge University, and after a stint working in Belize as an architect, as it happens, I went back to do a further degree in civil engineering. So trying to understand all the aspects of buildings and how to make them successful and how to make them function well. Also, I did a Master's of Business Administration a little bit later, which was good to understand the sort of business environment and the system in which we all operate. So I'm aware that the challenges of relating to housing in South America are very common across the world. I mean, my focus, certainly for the last few years, has mostly been in the UK, but everybody's facing this same problem: a shortage of housing, rising costs of both sale price of houses and the construction costs of houses. So very much similar patterns in everywhere I looked. I've advised the New Zealand government a little bit in terms of similar challenges, the Canadian government, and so forth. So very much common challenges. Possibly climate vulnerability is a particular issue across the region we're talking about here. But I think the kind of solutions that we need to apply are suitable for addressing all these challenges, whether it's hurricanes, whether it's earthquakes, whether it's the use of sustainable materials that are particularly suitable for a particular region. So when I was running the industrial strategy for construction for the UK, I carried out a lot of research and then demonstration projects at various scales of how we could build much more effectively and get better outcomes from the built environment. And something that I was aware of when I went into it was that there seemed to be a great deal of waste in the construction sector. Waste of materials, waste of energy, and possibly more than anything else, just waste of time. And if you compare it to the manufacturing sector, I think most analyses that I've seen show the process waste in the manufacturing sector at about 10%. So that's 10% of activities are not really adding value to the end product. You look at construction, and I'm pretty sure that this is consistent across the world. At least 50% of what goes on is process waste. So without doubt, there are solutions to be had there. There's enormous opportunity for improvement. And with the work that I did and the case studies that I initiated, that I sponsored, I feel we confidently demonstrated that we could relatively easily quadruple the productivity in terms of construction. In other words, we could build the buildings with a quarter of the labor that is typically used today. In terms of materials, there's certainly a lot of construction waste on site. So in terms of my 25% figure there, it's made up of construction waste, stuff that gets thrown away, put into skips, ends up in landfill, that sort of thing. But a proportion of it is also over-design. So that is really just designing things to be more substantial or solid than they need to be. And again, efficiency of design, I think now particularly with artificial intelligence and the ability to automate a lot of refinements to design, we can take out a lot of that over design. And then there's the energy performance of the buildings. Clearly, buildings emit a lot of carbon in the process of cooling and heating the buildings. And there's a great deal we can do to reduce the demand for heating and cooling by intelligent design, and also to incorporate within buildings what we call active building technology, such as solar panels, such as heat pumps, ground source or air source heat pumps, and really improve the energy performance of buildings. So a huge amount of opportunity to go at, to address. The next lesson that I got from all this work that I did was there pretty much has to be a significant role for government in the system around the built environment, the system of construction. The public sector, the government is, wherever you look, it's I guess it's the single biggest client of the construction sector, and it'll vary between countries, but more or less 50% of construction output is procured by the government. So there is huge influence there and huge ability to do things better. So if you compare the traditional approaches to buying buildings, on the one hand, I've got the project tendering, the lowest price approach, the short contracts, and the non-specific techniques in terms of building. Compare that with the alternative approach, which is the basis for much greater efficiency. That's portfolio frameworks, that's an overall value-based approach to procurement, whereby it's not just about minimizing the capital cost of the buildings, but minimizing the whole life cost of the building, and also the overall social benefit where applicable for the building, social and environmental benefit. Multi-year pipelines are much more efficient, and I think in terms of getting the private sector to invest in the right techniques, essential to the success of any transformation program. And in terms of techniques, MMC, that's modern methods of construction, which broadly means manufacturing approaches and doing as much as possible in factories, but taking a manufacturing approach to construction is again essential to being more efficient. And digital requirements, we're talking about digital modeling, building information modeling, and such like. So I've seen that the government has an incredibly important role with regards to all these things. And I think it's really important to stress that this is not a question of going with a begging bowl to the government to say, give us more money, give the construction sector more money, and therefore put greater demands on the taxpayers in the region. This is about getting better value for money from the public sector procured buildings. So, you know, in the case of my program, the total spend was between 500 million and £1 billion on the Transforming Construction program over 4 years. But the UK government is procuring about 50 billion worth of construction every year. So it doesn't take much in terms of reducing the total cost of procurement to justify this spend on improvement programs. And those improvement programs would relate to project gateways controlled by the government, better regulatory power and implementation, support and oversight for digital techniques in construction, and all that supported by procurement reform. I had on the previous slide the construction playbook, which was the revised policies for government procurement around construction. So just to drill into a little bit more detail around that, and as I say, I see the government as fundamentally leading this process. Shared standards, uniform construction methods promoted and enforced by the government. Metrics, data gathering, a real clear understanding of what looks good, what we're trying to achieve with regards to outcomes. Streamlined regulation, so planning delays and particularly uncertainty around the time it takes to get planning approvals for construction projects is so important. Stable demand, I mentioned already about that, and again, that is absolutely crucial to getting the private sector to invest in the production capability, the efficient construction capability of buildings. Building factories, they don't have to be hugely sophisticated, but it does mean investment in factory production. And that is something which is very susceptible to fluctuations in demand. So you have to have stable demand there. Quality assurance is important too. So a clarity around what the performance of the build, what is expected in terms of the performance of the buildings, in terms of certainly where there's earthquakes, where there's hurricane susceptibility. We in the UK, unfortunately, had a lot of problems with the fire performance of buildings, and we had a big tragedy at a building called Grenfell. Skills transformation. I think everywhere I've looked, there is felt to be a lack of suitable skilled people in the sector, and I think the solutions to that are partly to do with this productivity thing that I mentioned, so getting more output per hour worked, but also attracting people into the sector. Certainly in the UK, and again, I think more universally, it's actually a reasonably well-paid sector, construction, but people are reluctant to go into it. I don't think they realize that so much, and I don't think they realize just how much they can do meaningful work contributing to addressing climate change and addressing social problems through construction. And then supply chain development, supporting regional production capabilities. So in terms of a roadmap for this, it does require a certain systematic approach. In the UK, we've got a new or reconfigured organisation, government organisation, that oversees and supports all this, called NISTA. So the roadmap that I would suggest establish a shared standards framework and the metrics that I've talked about, and really lay the ground rules for change. Then start implementing these stable pipelines, this security of demand, move forward on the skills programs and looking at the changes to skills that are required, and longer term establishing this confidence in the longer term frameworks and the sustained performance monitoring and improvement, continuous improvement of the systems. Just to talk a little bit more about the skills that are needed. Certainly we need sufficient traditional trades, and that's not something to be overlooked. The carpentry and the masonry skills, but digital techniques are absolutely relevant to construction, building information modeling, BIM, and data collection and processing. Manufacturing skills. So this slightly blurred picture I've got on the slide here, that was one of my projects when I was at Skanska, where we standardized the design of parts of apartments. So we did about 1,000 apartments, and we standardized the design, and we had a simple factory arrangement to make those things. And the productivity improvements, in that case, we got about a 60% productivity improvement compared to site. And actually, it was the similarly trained people who did that work, but they were just doing it in a much more efficient environment. And then if you're making a lot of site, you've got the installation teams that need to understand how to put the building components into place efficiently. So that was the skills side of things. And looking across the region, there certainly seems to be a lot of good work going on, and I think that the real opportunity is to collaborate, get consistency across the different nations. I've got some examples of specific initiatives that I'm aware of here. But I think joining up, sharing information, standardizing the approaches is the real opportunity. So this is my last slide. So there is huge opportunity. There is a huge incentive for the government to act and play an active role in all this. I think for us in the construction sector and those interested parties, we really need to show and make the case for it being a good return on investment for the government. And through this, we can achieve great advances and great improvements in the outcomes. So thank you very much. I hope that was about the right length of talk. I look forward to hearing any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Sam. That was extremely helpful. I think you gave the audience a very clear view of the massive opportunity in terms of productivity, efficiency, and savings that the housing sector faces and the government's critical role as enabler of this new transformation you describe. And if you will, we're going to move on to the panel to invite three new other speakers to discuss all the innovations around materials and construction systems and the challenges they're facing, and then we can move on to questions.
Sure,
so
that's great.
In this new panel, well, as we look into the future of housing, it's clear that innovation is opening new doors. Yet the real challenge is not only adopting these new technologies, but it is understanding how we can make them grow and adapt to the local context. So this next conversation will invite us to understand how to bridge innovation with affordability and scale. So it is now my pleasure to introduce our first panelist, Niels Vandenberg, who is founder and CEO at EC Housing. He is an expert on international development, climate, and water, and has a background in sustainable forestry. He has worked with NGOs and governments on projects concerning water and sanitation. And he has extensive experience in coaching and supporting sustainable enterprises in developing countries. Hi, Niels, it's great to have you here in the webinar. We would love to hear from you and your line of work.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. And let's also celebrate technology here, because I'm calling in from Bangladesh, where I live. And my company is operating in East Africa. And we have panelists, I think, from all over the globe, and participants mainly from Latin America and the Caribbean, probably. So it's, thanks to technology that we're all here, right? Let me share a bit about our journey with Easy Housing and what we do, and also some key lessons learned where it comes to introducing nature-based materials and how I think this can be further accelerated. What we do at Easy Housing is that we've developed a proprietary timber housing solution. We operate mainly in East Africa, in Uganda and Kenya. In the early days, we've also done pilot projects in a few other countries, and we actually at some point explored a project with one of the local governments in Colombia, but that didn't take off, unfortunately. But who knows, we might become active in Latin America in the future. At this moment, we're not yet, but we are one of the leading nature-based construction companies in East Africa, and I'll share a bit about our experience. So why we do what we do? Well, first of all, and that's not very different in that sense, Sam is right. I think that the housing crisis is quite similar on all continents, right? So when it comes to, I've just seen the numbers for Latin America and the Caribbean in Sam's presentation. When it comes to the African continent, we see a housing deficit of 300 million homes. We also know that the built environment currently emits almost 40% of all global CO2 emissions, right? So that's construction, but also the energy used in the buildings. And that shows the magnitude of the challenge, right? I'm happy that the opportunities are also magnificent as a result, but like if we're going to build the billions of homes that are needed globally to fix the housing deficits, if we're going to do that with mainstream materials, it would have a devastating impact on the climate. So that's why I strongly believe it's necessary to introduce nature-based and climate-positive materials such as timber, but also bamboo, hemp. There are other solutions too. We do timber. What we also see, particularly on the African continent, I don't know if that's equally relevant for cities on the Latin American continent and in the Caribbean, but what we see is that most of the urban residents are renters, and they largely depend on informal rental markets, which is a big challenge because those are low cost. That's why they can cater these income segments, right? But often they are of very low quality and very climate vulnerable. And yeah, it's our mission to build a home for everyone. So we're also continuously looking, and I have a more detailed slide about that later on, but we're continuously looking into how we can tap into those market segments as well and come up with a high quality yet low cost alternative for those informal developments. Of course, there's a lot of diversity in these informal developments. Often it's kind of generalized by saying slums, Of course, it's more diverse than that, but fact is that the rapidly urbanizing populations in most African cities depend largely on informal markets, which often don't comply with building codes and other standards. So that's a big challenge to take into account as well. So our solution. So as said, we do timber housing. You see a photo here of one of the homes we completed in Uganda. For our customers, the solution means we offer affordable pricing. So we compete with concrete and cement and other mainstream materials. The homes are of high quality. We follow a human-centered design. So we've co-created all our housing typologies together with customers, and we're still applying mass customization. So we have a standard modular design options, which we continuously also adjust to customer needs based on data. So we don't do tailor-made designs for one client because that wouldn't be scalable. But if we see in our data that 10 or 20 clients want a certain customization, we include that in our standard models. Yeah, we offer high thermal comfort. It has a high heat buffering capacity, but then we also apply passive design principles in the design. And our homes are flood resilient. So as you can see also on this photo, the floors are elevated. That's to make them flood resilient, but also for other reasons. We don't want the timber to be in direct contact with the soil, for example, to make the homes also termite resilient. The timber is also pressure treated against termites, but it's also important that the timber is not in direct touch with the soil. The solution is sustainable because the timber stores carbon. When the trees grow, they take carbon out of the atmosphere, right, through carbon sequestration. And then in our homes, we ensure long-term carbon storage. Together with partners, we also developed the first construction stored carbon methodology on the African continent, so we can now actually also monetize the carbon impact. People often ask, like, if you cut trees, is that sustainable? What we actually do is through the partnerships that we have with our FSC certified timber partners is that we actually create sustainable demand for timber, which is very important because on the African continent there are a lot of sustainable forestry suppliers who actually cannot work in a commercially viable way. So they are actually many of them are at the verge of going bankrupt if we don't make sure that there is an increase in sustainable demand. We've actually seen in Kenya where the government had a timber logging ban for a long time for very good reasons. That's the whole sustainable timber sector collapsed because there was no demand, and they have for that reason recently lifted the ban. Well, social is of course that our homes are very affordable, but also, and that goes maybe a bit against the story of Sam, but of course that's maybe the difference in context. In Africa, we see in most African countries we see a very high youth unemployment, right? So we are very happy to create a lot of jobs throughout the value chains, and we're not necessarily economizing on labor. Also because it's a good thing to create jobs in that context, but also because labor is a very small cost component in the homes. Actually, the materials are a much larger parts. But yeah, coming from the Netherlands myself, I know that the context in Europe is very different. And scalable, so modular designs, and we also work in factories. We have a factory in Kampala and Nairobi where we do prefabrication. So we basically move the prefab frames to site. Yeah, then I'm going to the lessons learned. Well, I think one of our key lessons learned. So what you see here, first of all, is that we had to make a lot of pivots. So so I think the first lesson is it's not an easy ride to introduce innovative materials in the construction sector, which is, I think, across the globe, I would say a relatively conservative sector. Also, having worked in other sectors like renewable energy and other sectors, I think I'm somewhat entitled to compare construction to other sectors, and I think the construction sector is quite conservative and risk averse compared to other sectors. So when we started Easy Housing, I started Easy Housing with our co-founder Wolf, who also founded the sustainable construction company in the Netherlands. I joined him later on, indeed coming, as you told rightly in my bio, Marta, in the introduction, coming from international development and politics in the Netherlands and Europe, I co-founded Easy Housing with him. And initially we had the idea that we would develop this timber housing solution, which was not yet available in the African countries where we operate, and that we would sell this through a B2B model to project developers. So very much so like how Sustainer Homes, for example, is doing that in Europe. Now that didn't work. So we had this idea, we've built pilot homes, and we tried to sell the model to project developers. I can tell you I've spent a lot of time working on MOUs and NDAs and other legal documents with project developers, but it never ever resulted in selling any home. And I think one of the key reasons, by now we've sold over 70, by the way, I'm getting back there, but I'm getting back to that point of the track record. But one of the key pivots that we had to make is that we had to shift to a B2C approach, because what we saw is that when trying to sell an innovative concept to B2B players, to existing housing developers, which was our initial idea, and which I still feel would be a very scalable route to market in theory, but you end up in this catch-22, right? So you have the project developer that's saying, yeah, but I want to see a proof of demand. I don't know if my customers want to live in a timber home, because they might have all kinds of ideas about it. Maybe they think it's not fire safe. Maybe they think it's not sustainable because they love trees. A whole lot of misconceptions and biases, which I can all counter. But that's not the thing. This developer says, okay, I want to see a proof of demand. Okay, fine. Then we want to have a proof of demand. Then you go to a financier, a local bank, for example, a commercial bank in Uganda or Kenya, for that matter, and you say, okay, I want to build a larger pilot project, right, and sell these homes off plan to prove the demands. And then the bank says, yeah, but we also want to see a proof of demand. So show us your pipeline. And then you go to potential customers and they want to see the home. So we finally decided, yeah, this is not going to work. So we have to pivot to B2C, which is what we've done. So yeah, by now we've sold over 70 homes, and we signed slightly more contracts. As you can see, there are 85. And we're now also developing a rental product to try to tap into that large informal rental market in the growing African cities where we operate. But I think lesson one is that you have to be very resilient, and that you need to pivot a lot. And that I'm getting back to that, but also that you need to vertically integrate. You need to do a lot of things yourself, as otherwise you face a lot of resistance along, especially as being a first mover. I hope this will change for innovators coming after us with similar solutions. But being a first mover, you face a lot of challenges along the innovation adoption chain, right? So if you want to overcome that, you have to do it yourselves to basically show that there is a market and that there is a demand. So the track records, as said, over 70 projects completed, more than that sold. And also some great recognition, so that's very nice, including by Hábitat for Humanity, which is one of the organizers of this webinar, right? But it's nice that the impact didn't go unnoticed. And that also helps a lot to build up the credibility, right? To get funding, for example, for larger projects and capital to pre-finance things. Yeah, so a bit about our impacts. So as said, our homes are low cost. We provide safe and adequate housing at a low price, climate resilient, so flood resilient, but also hurricane/cyclone resilience, heat resilience. Those are all features that are inbuilt in the designs. Gender balance in construction. Half of our construction leads are female, and we have around 30% female carpenters in the value chain. So that's also nice. And circular in design, near zero waste. So our homes can be fully relocated, refurbished, and we make sure that we have almost zero waste throughout the value chain, particularly also by working with standardized designs, so standard dimensions, so very little offcuts. You can see the impact per home here, the CO2 removed. I explained that process, right, with the trees sequestrating the carbon and then storing it in the homes. The forest sustained, so every easy home that we build provides economic incentives for the sustainable management of 4 football fields, so that's 2 hectares of sustainable forests. about 5 jobs per home, and yeah, a significant spin-off value on the local economies of 61,000 USD. As said again, the jobs provided, we consider that a great social impact point. Yeah, and this is my last slide, so I hope I'm within time, but these are some of the key lessons learned, some of which I already touched upon, right? But just to summarize it here, yeah, I think one of our key lessons learned is really that we had to vertically integrate. So we have to do sales, marketing, the engineering, the architecture, the construction, everything ourselves for the time being. We of course hope that it will not always be like this. We needed to pivot, and yeah, construction is a relatively conservative sector. And as said, in relation to that, to the vertical integration, maybe this is one last slide then to show. We really try to also develop products for each segment of the income pyramid. And one of the most recent ones we're working on now is the rental proposition, which you see in the base of the pyramid, basically targeting really these people that now rely on informal markets. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to the questions.
Thank you, Niels, for sharing your first-hand experience in developing an efficient, sustainable housing solution that is tailored to the local context, despite all the challenges you mentioned. So now we will move on to our next speaker, who is Melissa Ferro. She's the lead technical specialist at the Colombian Green Building Council and a lead green associate. Her work focuses on integrating sustainability criteria into construction systems, promoting high-performance environmental practices, and strengthening capacity within the sector. Please join me in welcoming Melissa.
Hola, buenos días a todos. Bueno, yo voy a estar hablando en español. Voy acá a compartir mi pantalla. Regálenme un segundo. Me confirman si ya la están viendo.
Sí.
Listo, muchas gracias. Bueno, pues buenos días a todos. Como les comentaba, mi nombre es Melissa Ferro. Yo soy especialista técnica líder en el Consejo Colombiano de Construcción Sostenible. Y bueno, hoy en esta charla enfocada en cómo construir la vivienda del futuro en América Latina, pues me gustaría empezar hablando de este concepto de la vivienda del futuro. Entonces, hablar de la vivienda del futuro, pues siempre es hablar de la vivienda, porque siempre estamos construyendo la vivienda del futuro y las ciudades del futuro. Construir vivienda siempre hace parte como este gran imaginario colectivo, y esta imagen de 1909 nos muestra pues cómo en ese momento se estaban imaginando la vivienda del futuro, en esta idea de apilar la vivienda y la vida urbana en rascacielos y generar pues estos territorios ilimitados que combinaban la naturaleza, la vivienda, la vida urbana, el aire, pues en estas grandes estructuras. Esta idea moderna del rascacielos, que respondía pues a las necesidades de ese momento y de resolver los problemas de hacinamiento que existían en Europa por el crecimiento de las ciudades en la era de la industrialización, luego por la necesidad de reconstruir Europa después de las guerras mundiales, generó esta idea de la vivienda como una unidad funcional y como una máquina para habitar. Una máquina pues que es replicable o que fuera replicable y que reflejaba un ideal de desarrollo basado en el uso de equipos, sistemas y tecnología que nos permitía o que le permitía, digamos, a las ciudades y a las familias resolver las necesidades de bienestar, confort y calidad pues a través de equipos, sistemas y tecnología. Pero bueno, ¿qué sucede y qué empieza a suceder en Latinoamérica en un contexto donde nosotros entendemos el bienestar y el confort de una manera distinta? Donde nuestros climas nos permiten una aproximación diferente al contexto y donde empezamos a ver estos ejemplos, como por ejemplo esta casa de Roberto Burle Marx en Brasil, que invitan a que los materiales, la estructura y el espacio se relacionen con la naturaleza, con el viento, con el agua, y se logran adoptar estos ideales o adaptar estos ideales modernos de la época al contexto y a otras formas de entender los materiales y de lograr el bienestar y el confort de una manera mucho más contextualizada. Y además, pues empezando, y esto un poco más reciente, empezando a entender que existen otras formas de habitar y otras nociones de desarrollo que no responden a los ideales que existen desde otras latitudes. Porque cuando tenemos soluciones descontextualizadas, pues es cuando empieza a fallar pues el sistema y empieza a fallar estas soluciones de vivienda. Y es que la vivienda en América Latina es un tema muy complejo y de carácter sistémico. Como bien lo mencionaban en la primera charla, el déficit de vivienda en América Latina es del 45%. Esto se divide entre déficit cuantitativo y déficit cualitativo, es decir, se requieren viviendas nuevas, se requiere mejorar las viviendas existentes. Hay además un alto índice de informalidad. Esto se debe pues a falta de acceso a financiamiento, y refleja pues sobre todo los altos índices de pobreza pues que aún tenemos en la región y la desigualdad también tan grande que tenemos en la región, lo cual genera además una alta vulnerabilidad en nuestras ciudades y particularmente pues ahora cuando añadimos en la ecuación el cambio climático, pues nos empieza a generar unas problemáticas grandes, principalmente en las ciudades donde vive el 80% de la población de América Latina y el Caribe. Entonces ahora, digamos que frente pues, a toda esta problemática debemos empezar a entender cómo podemos atender estas necesidades de vivienda al tiempo que reducimos las emisiones y que nos volvemos también resilientes frente al cambio climático. Y pues además considerando que pues si no lo hacemos de esta manera vamos a seguir contribuyendo a la desigualdad porque actualmente también las personas de bajos ingresos, las comunidades, digamos, socioeconómicas más vulnerables, son también particularmente más vulnerables frente a los efectos del cambio climático, debido pues a que pues comúnmente están ocupando zonas de riesgo o están en barrios y desarrollos que tienen una falta de cobertura arbórea, gran proporción de superficies impermeables que los hace más vulnerables frente a olas de calor, frente a inundaciones, frente a deslizamientos, entre otros posibles efectos, digamos, también del cambio climático. Y pues ya estamos viendo muchos de estos efectos en nuestra región, estamos viendo hoy y pues cada vez son más frecuentes, racionamientos, huracanes devastadores, la desaparición de nevados, como el caso del pico Humboldt en Venezuela, grandes inundaciones, como lo que sucedió en Brasil, incendios, la disminución, sequías con la disminución del canal de Panamá. Bueno, digamos que son varias consecuencias del cambio climático que estamos enfrentando hoy en día y que nos traen pues unos riesgos que son físicos, que son económicos y también que son unos riesgos y unas situaciones que traen víctimas mortales. Y pues este es un problema que además tiende a aumentar, ya que pues sí se prevé que las temperaturas en Latinoamérica y principalmente en las ciudades aumenten entre 2.3 y 2.7 grados centígrados hacia finales de ciclo. Entonces, debemos pensar cómo vamos a atender este problema, cómo podemos volvernos más resilientes. Digamos, en este sentido, se requiere una solución integral de vivienda que combine una visión compartida de qué es el desarrollo sostenible. Entonces, tenemos que entender para nosotros como región qué es el desarrollo sostenible, que pues tiene que ser viable económicamente y tiene que tener un soporte tecnológico que permita pues, soluciones que sean escalables, que sean soluciones sí, que reduzcan las emisiones, que sean bajas en carbono, que nos permitan ser más resilientes frente al cambio climático, Pero adicionalmente necesitamos que sean soluciones diferenciales, pertinentes y adaptadas a los diferentes contextos culturales y climáticos que tenemos en Latinoamérica. Y pues esto es ¿por qué? Porque la vivienda es un elemento que es esencial en la vida de las personas, tiene un impacto profundo en la calidad de vida, en las comunidades, en la conexión con el entorno, es donde se tejen las relaciones e interacciones que permiten el desarrollo de las personas, de la sociedad, y en ese sentido, pues todas las personas tienen derecho a una vivienda sostenible, saludable y resiliente. Ahora les voy a mostrar rápidamente 3 ejemplos de soluciones habitacionales que se han dado en Colombia y que buscan, desde la innovación en materiales y sistemas constructivos, probar soluciones en diferentes contextos climáticos y culturales en la búsqueda de generar nuevos sistemas que se puedan replicar donde pues, sea pertinente. En 2 de los casos que les voy a mostrar se van a utilizar materiales vernáculos y de origen natural como la tierra y la madera, y en otro les voy a mostrar un caso pues, donde se ha innovado en un material que es muy utilizado, que es el concreto. Entonces, el primer ejemplo es un proyecto en La Guajira que se llama Mi Roku. Este proyecto es un proyecto de Casa para mí, que hace parte de la fundación del grupo Argos. Es un proyecto en la Alta Guajira, en el municipio de Uribia, y que busca generar una solución de vivienda para la comunidad guayú, utilizando la tierra y el yotojoro, que son, el yotojoro son las fibras del cactus, que son los principales elementos constructivos de la zona. Pues sí, de los sistemas constructivos tradicionales, y son también los elementos que mantienen la conexión con el paisaje. En estas viviendas, o digamos en este proyecto, lo que se busca es hacer un trabajo colaborativo con la comunidad para entender la forma de habitar de las personas y cómo la vivienda, la cultura y el entorno constituyen la habitabilidad del espacio. Con esto, pues, se genera una solución habitacional que busca resolver problemas actuales de la población, entonces, donde las viviendas tradicionales son inestables, son altamente vulnerables, carecen, digamos, de seguridad y de calidad también del espacio. Y también hay una carencia básica de servicios básicos, o pues una carencia de servicios básicos de agua y de energía, y algunas soluciones que se han intentado previamente en la zona, pues no responden a la identidad cultural ni al contexto. Entonces, pues este proyecto busca también abordar esas problemáticas, y de esta manera se propuso realizar un sistema constructivo que tiene una estructura, o se basa en una estructura de steel framing, que da la estabilidad y seguridad estructural a las viviendas, y se desarrolla un recubrimiento para los muros en tierra con un sistema de revoques. Este material, pues no solo, digamos, responde y hace parte de la tradición constructiva de la comunidad, sino también aporta el confort térmico, está disponible en la zona y le permite a las personas de la comunidad construir los muros y hacer reparaciones en el tiempo. Entonces se construye pues como esta especie de bareque metálico. Además, para las viviendas, acá pueden ver pues cómo se ven ya las viviendas construidas. Se instalaron sistemas de recolección de aguas lluvias, así como un panel solar por vivienda para atender la carencia de servicios básicos. Y pues se genera pues una vivienda que está, digamos, adaptada al contexto y que es replicable en la zona. En la primera etapa de este proyecto se están terminando de construir 30 viviendas, pero en territorios homologables puede llegar a impactar hasta 500 familias. El segundo proyecto es un edificio de 4 pisos que se construyó en Bogotá, un edificio en madera llamado Bloque M Experimental, del arquitecto Diego Velandia. Este es un proyecto de vivienda clase media, el primero de este tipo en el país. Y bueno, pues acá recordando pues también la charla anterior, pues definitivamente la madera pues es uno de estos materiales que tiene múltiples beneficios en términos de pues, reducción de emisiones y el gran potencial que tiene de impactar también comunidades forestales. La estructura principal de este edificio se fabricó en madera laminada encolada. Los entrepisos y divisiones internas se fabricaron con madera cepillada y láminas de OSB, y los sistemas de unión fueron todos en acero y la estructura y la cimentación, perdón, en concreto reforzado. La estructura principal fue ensamblada por un equipo de 4 trabajadores en 3 semanas, entonces pues acá hay una reducción significativa pues en el tiempo y también en la necesidad de mano de obra, una reducción significativa también en la generación de residuos por la reutilización de los diferentes elementos de corte que se podían poner pues como en otros elementos. También el sistema permitió la incorporación de barreras antirruido, aislamiento térmico para mejorar también el confort térmico y acústico. No obstante, pues este proyecto particularmente y pensar en la escalabilidad de este tipo de proyectos en Colombia es difícil, existen muchos retos. El primero, digamos que es pues uno de los principales, es que no hay suficiente capacidad de producción de madera estructural en el país, por lo que para este caso tocó importar la madera desde Chile, que tienen un gran desarrollo, digamos, en otro sentido, en este tipo de sistemas. En Colombia hay pocos ingenieros especializados en el cálculo de estructuras en madera y hay conocimiento limitado en general en el sector y de las entidades también sobre la normativa sismo resistente y condiciones constructivas específicas de este tipo de sistemas, lo que generó muchos retrasos y muchos problemas en el tema de licenciamiento y trámites. Y bueno, y por último, ya les voy a mostrar esta casa, que es la casa R. Es una casa, es un prototipo de vivienda rural bis impresa en 3D en concreto. Este proyecto se diseñó entendiendo las dinámicas y necesidades de una familia campesina para un contexto de clima frío. Con este proyecto se estaba buscando probar el sistema constructivo en términos de velocidad, de optimización de recursos, de calidad, de precisión, también pues de bienestar, que tanto aportaba el confort térmico, confort acústico. Se hizo un ejercicio para entender también la huella de carbono y para entender pues los costos que puede tener este tipo de sistemas, pues particularmente para la construcción de vivienda pues de interés social en zonas rurales en Colombia. De los resultados, pues bueno, se logró la impresión del 100% de los muros de esta casa en 3 días y se redujeron en un 72% los residuos de construcción y demolición respecto pues a una vivienda tradicional o a la construcción de una vivienda tradicional. Se realizaron también simulaciones de confort térmico y acústico, demostrando pues que había mejoras en ambos, particularmente en pues este sistema por tener el muro hueco, tener como esta condición de doble muro, mejoró en un 36% las horas de confort de la vivienda, lo que redunda pues eventualmente en un ahorro energético también. También se realizó la evaluación de impactos ambientales, calculando la huella de carbono y el consumo de agua del proyecto. Acá sí se identificó pues una oportunidad de mejora. Digamos que hay unos impactos mayores asociados al consumo de agua y a la huella de carbono. Pues esto hace parte, digamos, de lo que sigue en adelante para la implementación de este sistema a gran escala. Cómo se puede seguir trabajando en mejorar la eficiencia del sistema para reducir pues esos impactos ambientales que tiene pues ya como tal el material. Y bueno, y si bien ninguna solución es perfecta, digamos que estas soluciones empiezan a ser pertinentes también en la medida en que responden adecuadamente al contexto y a las necesidades de las familias y de las personas que están habitando en los diferentes territorios. Bueno, por último quisiera pues dejar como mensaje que la vivienda no se limita pues exclusivamente a la solución de la vivienda, y esto es muy importante que lo tengamos en cuenta, sino que comprende el acceso a espacio público, a movilidad, a equipamientos, servicios y a la integración con el contexto. Y esto lo debemos tener en cuenta pues cuando estamos construyendo vivienda y cuando estamos pues generando estas soluciones de mejoramientos también. Y recordemos siempre pues que la vivienda del futuro es la que diseñamos y construimos hoy. Y mientras la práctica actual siga estando orientada a la eficiencia y a modelos únicos, lo único que vamos a lograr es una sociedad eficientemente más insostenible. Bueno, muchas gracias.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you for zooming in on the LATAM context and for showing us that even within the same country, there's no one size fits all. Everything has to be very carefully aligned to the local context and with the culture identity of the families. So thank you for that. Now we're moving on to our third speaker, Philip Lund Nielsen. He is co-founder and head of Americas at Cobot International. Cobot is the world's largest supplier of 3D printers for the construction industry. Welcome, Philip.
Buenas, mucho gusto. Soy Felipe. Estoy aprendiendo español, pero soy de Dinamarca. That's all Spanish you get from me today. No, but thank you for having me, and thank you for the good presentations that came before me. So today we're going to talk about how 3D printing is transforming construction as we know it. And let me just see here if I can if I can share my audio as I'm presenting. I'm always having issues with that. Actually, let's just skip it. I'm going to spend too much time figuring that out. So yeah, I'm one of the co-founders of the company, and I'm going to go over 3 very simple segments here today. What is 3D printing for construction, some use cases, and I'm very lucky because Melissa already covered some of the use cases from our customers by Argos in Colombia, and then some future trends in the next 12 minutes. So we have a global housing crisis, as was also mentioned earlier by Sam, for instance. 300 million homes need to be built. Prices are increasing drastically. People are getting priced out of their homes and so on. And one of the reasons is that we see this. By the way, I hope everybody is seeing my screen right now. Otherwise, let me know. Okay.
Yes.
Muy bien. So one of the reasons we see that is the productivity in construction is very low. If we look at the past 2-3 decades, manufacturing, the output has increased over 3% per year on average. Whereas if you look at construction, it's less than 0.5% on average per year. And some years it's even trending downwards. We produce fewer homes per worker than we did the year prior. Why is that? One of the reasons is we today build highly manually, a lot of people involved. There's a lot of waste also, which is driving up the cost, driving up the timelines, making it less sustainable, and so on. So our vision is to transform that with 3D printers to automate the full construction site and let the machines do the hard work. It's only operated by a crew of 3 people. And this is how it looks. This is one of our 3D printers, and I would love to show you exactly how that looks in action. So now I'm going to show you a 400 square meter project that was done in Germany. First, you install the 3D printer, which takes approximately 4 to 5 hours. You load it up with the digital file of the house, and then you let the machine do the work. depositing layers on top of layers of concrete to create a physical structure. The other workers work in unison with the equipment. Here are the electricians. They now prepare for the second floor. And then the machine goes again. So this will be a 3-story building in total from our customer Perry in Germany. Why do you 3D print? Well, our customers say it's number one, because of cost savings. Some of them now save up to 30%. 30% already in a very young industry. Printing faster. Some now saying that they save up to 50% in construction timelines versus conventional methods. They can print a full house in less than a work week. It's the customization, the design freedom to print architecture, custom architecture that would otherwise be far too expensive to do. Reducing the waste and making it more sustainable because you only print what you need with very few offcuts. It's printing in durable materials like concrete, which also makes it very permit friendly. And lastly, very, very scalable production. We have machines that can print up to 5 stories, 5 floors in height. You can see the technology is being used all over the globe. We're based, if we talk Latin America and Mexico, Guatemala, Colombia, Argentina, and Puerto Rico, and expanding in that region. And you can see we have 3 regional offices. The North and Latin American segment is covered by our Miami office. I used to live in Miami up until this summer, but now I'm back in Copenhagen, Denmark, where I was born and raised. Some examples of projects are everything from affordable and high-end housing, retail stores, schools, offices, medical facilities, and so on, to the more industrial infrastructure type of projects like data centers, warehouses, water tanks, and so on. So I'm going to jump into a few use cases so you can see the benefits. Here, various types of homes from 5 or 6 different continents. They were all done with the same machine. And you can see the output you can get is vastly different than what you would get conventionally. Yes, you can make it look like a conventional home, but you can also get these beautiful curves and more human-friendly designs that would otherwise be far too cost prohibitive. Here from the interior, you can even 3D print a bathtub, as you see there in the upper left-hand corner. Here's a customer from Colorado printing affordable homes. He is now 30% cheaper than conventional construction, and he is 50% faster than conventional. This project here is a 30-unit development, and the latest house you see there in the aerial view took just 4 workdays to complete. In the US, to do that in 4 workdays, you would need a lot of workers, and these workers are getting harder and harder to find. Another example from Germany, 30% faster, 10% cheaper, and they print these apartment buildings from small, medium to large. Back to the US, California, 110 square meters. The latest home here, they did 6 in this series, was done in just 2 work weeks. These homes are built to replace those that were destroyed in the California wildfires. And this is fully permitted according to local codes. California has very strict codes because of seismic activity. And we've seen the same in, for instance, Guatemala. They have also they have a lot of seismic activity as well. But it's definitely doable to print to meet those codes, and sometimes print even better structures than the conventional ones. I'm going to skip the video. Now we jump from houses to the more industrial ones. Here is a data center, 0.5 megawatt, 600 square meters. There's a huge increase in the construction of data centers these days, driven among others by, you might have heard of artificial intelligence. So that is driving a lot of demand for data centers, and especially modular, scalable data centers like this is being constructed more and more. So 3D printing can certainly help. And this was printed in a city center. So you can see how the design, it doesn't have to be just a square box. There's actually a kindergarten in the back. It's a very, very organic design that you have here. Coastal infrastructure. Due to global warming, we have bigger and bigger waves coming in, rising tides and so on. So these modules here from Miami, they act as wave breakers that dissipates wave energy as the waves come in. And they allow for marine life to flourish. Fish can swim in and out, algae can grow on the side, and so on. Water tanks here in the Middle East. You can print these water tanks with far less material than conventional precast water tanks that you see there to the left. They have the same thickness from top to bottom, but that's not really needed because the water pressure, the hydrostatic pressure, is much bigger at the bottom than at the top. So with 3D printing, we can actually decrease the width. It's thinner at the top, reducing the materials used by 25%, making these tanks more sustainable and more cost efficient. Lastly, I'm going to talk a bit about what I see for the future of this industry, because it's a still very, very young industry. We only started selling machines 5 years ago. 3 trends. Number 1, we're going to see massive tech improvements. This is a video that's almost 100 years old of a guy named William Urschel, and he had this idea of automating wall construction, as you can see here. It almost looks like one of the 3D printers we have now, just with a different kind of setup. But that was back almost 100 years ago, and as with any other technology, we're going to see that they become more reliable and get more features, and they will come down in price, just as we've seen with mobile phones, PCs, and so on. So that's the first trend. Trend number 2 is we're going to see much, much bigger scale. This is a project one of our customers is doing in Qatar, 40,000 square meters. It's a project, it's a school project for girls. They're very big. And for a very big project, you need a big 3D printer. So this 3D printer here actually can print up to 5 floors in height and 30 meters by 100 meters in the footprint. And with that, you get the scale benefits, further driving down cost and construction timelines. Bigger scale is the second one. Now, the third trend, we're going to see multifunctionality. Right now, these printers are predominantly used for 3D printing. But I think in the future, they're going to have more features, allowing them to address more activities on a construction site. Here you have an example of a printer that we developed for one of our customers. It has an additional robotic tool that you see there to the right. And you can imagine that robotic tool could be, for instance, spray painting walls, placing insulation, or placing conduit, and so on, to further reduce cost and to improve construction timelines. And those are some of the ways that our 3D printers help with the big global housing crisis. Thank you a lot for listening in. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Philippe. That was fantastic. I think your solution tackles all the issues that were raised in Sam's first presentation about efficiency, productivity, and waste. So it's really good to learn about these solutions and see how they are still developing and improving. Thank you for that. So now we're going to move to a bit of a Q&A. Would appreciate if our speakers could limit their response to around 3 to 4 minutes so that we can have time to hear from all of you. I'm going to start with Sam. I'm going to invite him back to the conversation. Sam, we've been listening in the past hour or so about a lot of innovations with regards to construction materials and systems. What barriers do you think exists to mainstreaming these type of solutions, and how can industry and policy and especially government help accelerate the adoption of these type of solutions?
Hi, thanks, Marta. I think most of the applications for more sustainable materials are well suited to offsite fabrication, and then that comes back to the issue of consistent demand. So any kind of innovation in the construction sector seems to be very much reliant on confidence in the demand, and you know, there's a lot of casualties there. There's a lot of companies that have been set up expecting a certain level of demand, and it hasn't come through. So that's one thing. Certainly in the UK, the regulations around bio-based materials are not particularly helpful. So, you know, when you store carbon in timber, you know, that's a positive thing in terms of carbon emissions, but at the moment, for the UK regulations anyway, it's assumed that at some point in the future that timber will be discarded or degrade, which is probably not going to be the case. And I think we need regulations that are realistic about these and essentially support the use of bio-based materials, which are you know, which sequestrate carbon rather than emit carbon. So I'd say those are the two big factors.
Thank you, Sam. And Niels, related to this question, in your experience, what shifts might be in policy, financing, or capacity building are necessary to move these bio-based housing solutions you mentioned from small scale to more wider adoption, even included within the national housing programs?
Yes, I very much liked what Sam shared in his presentation, right, about government procurement. I think in most countries and also globally, governments, including multilateral organizations like UN agencies, they are the largest customers, right, in the market. So if they set targets, that has a huge impact. So for example, in the Netherlands, the municipality of Amsterdam has set the target that all new residential homes, out of all new residential homes, 20% has to be made out of timber, which has a massive impact, of course, on the market development, because that means you don't have to look for a proof of demand anymore. The government is actually organizing the demand. So I definitely think that such targets can be of great help. So just government targets in new housing projects, affordable housing developments, those kind of targets can help a lot. I agree also with Sam's point on building regulations. They can often be very very disadvantageous for new innovations, sometimes not for bad reasons, right? Because often the regulations have just been based on the materials that were out there back then. But once you start advocating for changes, you will often face resistance as well, because of course there are vested interests. For example, organizations producing concrete and cement, they might not want specific regulations to be changed. So yeah, I think that's another one. And I think what's important for organizations, for startups, and you know, all the disruptors that are out there, is I think aggregation is very important as well. So whether it's when speaking with the government or whether it's when speaking with capital investors, you often see that each and every innovator individually is too small to either change the policy or to attract large ticket sizes from development banks, for example. But together we are big enough. So we are also involved in developing several consortia to have that strength, to have that power. But I think that's extremely important for also other companies working with bio-based materials, right? So bamboo, hemp, you name it, we should join forces because together we can have that aggregation that's needed to bring along real change.
Thank you. Yes, collaboration is key. Melissa, now moving on to you. You mentioned during your presentation the importance of the vulnerabilities we have around climate change and the need for resilient building, and also the importance of measuring the impact in terms of carbon emissions. From your perspective, how can we ensure that we can implement all these solutions and decarbonize the sector without increasing costs for the families?
So can I answer in Spanish or do you need me? Okay, bueno.
Yes.
Bueno, ese es, digamos, como el gran reto, ¿no? Lograr, pues, poder tener soluciones de vivienda que no cuesten más y que, pues, puedan demostrar que son sostenibles y resilientes frente al cambio climático. Yo creo que, y pues comparto digamos, lo que comentaban anteriormente, pues desde el uso de materiales, pues del uso de biomateriales y materiales que pues son vernáculos y que ya se han utilizado, digamos, tradicionalmente en nuestros territorios, pero que necesitamos entender e innovar sobre esos materiales para que sean escalables y para que sean soluciones que se puedan implementar pues, de una manera segura, replicable en los diferentes territorios. Pues necesitamos trabajar como en varios aspectos. Uno, en tecnología, yo creo que nosotros en Latinoamérica sí tenemos un rezago importante en desarrollo tecnológico y en inversión en tecnología. Creo que hay una falta, digamos, de entendimiento de cómo nos podemos asociar entre las universidades, el sector público y el sector privado para poder potenciar eso. Hay unos casos en los que se ha empezado a hacer, por ejemplo, justamente el ejemplo de la vivienda de 3D en concreto es una asociación entre el sector público, ahí pues participó el municipio donde se desarrolló pues esta vivienda, la universidad, estuvo la Universidad Nacional de Colombia, el sector privado, desde las empresas con fama y Argos. Entonces yo creo que ese tipo de soluciones, ese tipo de asociaciones son las que permiten escalar las soluciones, probarlas y luego y pues ir entendiendo eso también cómo se ajusta a las realidades normativas y regulatorias, que también son como otro grande aspecto a entender cuando utilizamos estos materiales que no son con los que tradicionalmente venimos construyendo. Entonces, digamos que una parte muy grande de poder lograr reducir el costo y que pues que estas soluciones no sean muy costosas y que cada vez no sean nuevamente un piloto, pues es eso, lograr estandarizar también desde la normativa y desde la producción tecnológica, pues y dar ese soporte tecnológico a este tipo de soluciones. Y lo otro, pues que es muy importante apostarle pues a tener los datos para probar que realmente pues sí estamos reduciendo emisiones, probar que sí estamos logrando ser más resilientes y con esto pues motivar también y generar un cambio en el mercado impulsado pues por las políticas también que existen a nivel nacional y a nivel pues global en términos de cambio climático.
Muchas gracias, Melissa. And Philip, we've talked a lot, besides of collaboration, which has been an important point that has been brought up by the other speakers. We've also been talking a lot about the local context and adapting to the local context. And in your view and for COBOT, what are the regions or local contexts you see as having the highest potential for rapid technological adoption in the housing sector? And what challenges are you facing for more accelerated deployment of these technologies globally?
Sure. I see the biggest potential really in areas that has a lack of labor which in many cases is all over the globe almost, and where production, where the construction of homes is done inefficiently or done very manually, because those are the two blocks. Too few people that are not automated, right? So that's anywhere around the globe, really. Of course, there are certain clusters that will have potentially a higher rate of the one or the other. But as you saw from our world map before, we see this being deployed on a global scale. The biggest, or one of the big blockers of growth is educating the workforce, right? You're letting people use technology of the future, so that also means you have to train them in using it. However, that also should in time lead to higher wages, so major benefits, and it's less back-breaking, right? Because the machines do the hard work.
Great, thanks. Well, I'd like to open up if any of you would like to give one last remark or conclusion after having heard the other speakers. I'm going to check if there are any further questions online. Somebody's asking about the cobalt printers, if there's any local or national government interested in buying one, and if you've had experience with the public sector so far.
Many of our customers, they get support directly from the government. It could be, for instance, I have one customer, I cannot name the area, but they have now 45 units signed to do for the government, right? That is then sponsoring this technology. In addition, many of them receive grants, research grants, that could be either to make the concrete greener or add new tools to address more activities on each construction site. So there's definitely a government interest in this.
Perfect, thanks. And it's earthquake resistant, right? Somebody else also asked that online.
Yes, I mean, we have customers printing in Guatemala, in California, in Japan, and so on. And all of them have had their projects permitted.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody else would like to give some last words or remarks before moving on to the next part of the webinar.
Yeah, I'll say something. I think where the real attention needs to be applied in terms of implementation is what part of the government and what entity within a government is responsible for supporting progress in the construction sector. It needs to be relatively protected from election cycles. You know, in a democracy, quite rightly, we have elections every few years. So you don't want to be disrupted and change the policy every few years. And you need to have sufficient depth of capability to support and implement the good practice that we know is possible. And I think the most substantial and successful example of that is Singapore, the Building and Construction Authority in Singapore, which is, I think, the most substantial and most effective and professional entity within government to support the construction sector. Thanks.
Thank you. That's a very valuable insight. Thanks. They're asking about prefabricated homes. Sam, since I have you online, what do you think of them?
I think that we shouldn't be fixated on boxes, on units that are 3D. I think panelized is just as good. The main thing to think about is the amount of value that is created, what we call pre-manufactured value, the amount of value that is created outside of the construction site, and then you just bring the pieces to the construction site and assemble in an efficient way. But it doesn't have to be volumetric. It can be panelized, and that is pretty much as efficient.
Thank you. Thank you. We will make sure to look up Singapore as an example.
Great. If this is the end, thank you very much. It's been a really enjoyable session, very interesting speeches from everybody. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you everyone. And also you for hosting, Marta. It was very insightful and I learned a lot from the other speakers as well. So.
No, thank you all for your time and for sharing your experiences and these very valuable insights for the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So now I'm going to welcome Ms. Georgia Rambelli, Director of Mission Innovation at the Urban Transitions Mission. She works to mobilize decision makers across all levels of government to prioritize climate neutral and net zero pathways. Within the mission, she empowers cities to adopt innovative solutions to accelerate capacity building and in order to close the gap between research, development, and deployment. Welcome, Ms. Georgia.
Thank you very much for having me, and I hope you can hear me well.
Yes.
Fantastic. Then I will share my screen and I will try very briefly to share with you a little bit about what our initiative is doing, but also to give you a bit of a flavor of what we see as a key priorities when it comes to urban transitions and what relates to housing in our cities. As just mentioned, our mission is an initiative, part of a larger umbrella initiative called Mission Innovation. The idea behind Mission Innovation is to support a decade of investment in innovation, in particular for clean energy transitions, being those effective, sustainable, but also affordable. The way that we work in particular is focusing on a cohort of cities and helping them by bridging the gap between what they need, the solutions that are available, this innovation that it's being developed, but also future innovation that it's needed. We don't work just with cities. We are supported by a global innovation alliance of partners, our co-leads, the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, which hosts currently the Secretariat and represents the commitment of 14,000 communities across the world that are devoted to make their community more resilient, more inclusive, but also more decarbonized. In addition, we work with a number of national governments, like Brazil, the UK, and a few others, as you can see, from across the world, as well as with the European Commission. Part of our Global Innovation Alliance are also a number of different international organizations, and some, like the International Energy Agency, IRENA, and others, are very active in helping us build the capacity and the knowledge of our cities in really learning how to make the next steps in becoming net zero, resilient, and inclusive. Last but not the least, we try to pilot and to test some of these solutions, and where possible also to co-create some innovation with a number of private sector partners that help us bring these innovative approaches on the ground to our cities. So I already mentioned that we work with a cohort. At the moment, we count 117 cities from 47 countries across the world. All of these communities have set themselves the target to become net zero, and they have been embarking on a journey to really not only develop a plan, understand where they stand, but also to really identify what solutions are needed to make that leap to become net zero in the future. Many of them have singled out specific actions and measures, and together with us, they are trying to find not only technical solutions, but also regulatory and financial solutions that can help them achieve this specific target. The first step that we undertake while supporting them is to identify, from one side, how do we build their knowledge? How do we build their capacity? How do we help them understand what is possible out there? There is so much going on in this very fast-paced world, and it's impossible, of course, to have the pulse of everything that is happening across the board. This is where collaboration like the one that we are having today with this community is so helpful to make sure that these solutions are landing in the right hands in our communities, and that they can learn where they can turn to not only understand what is available, but also options to implement it. From the other side, as I mentioned, we like to work with them to implement some of these solutions. So I hope that even in the partnerships and in the examples that we heard today, maybe we can find some of our communities that are interested to apply some of the important solutions and technologies that you have mentioned today. The first step for us is to understand where really the priorities are positioned. This is a bit of a snapshot of the first 100 cities that have joined our community. And as you can see, roughly a quarter of our cities have included housing and low emission districts as one of the key priorities that they would like to focus on to respond to the issue of climate change locally, but also to implement their vision to net zero. That doesn't, although, mean that the others are not really looking into this priority in particular. Sometimes they don't, let's say, talk about housing and the first and foremost challenge that they want to undertake solutions for. Sometimes it relates to finding better and more sustainable ways to use land. Sometimes it's about implementing nature-based solutions for cooling or making their building more livable. Sometimes it relates to community engagement and making sure the citizens are understanding the importance of also embarking in this journey of retrofitting and implementing more sustainable housing locally. So please do look at this puzzle as a lot of different ways to bring together a larger picture that really responds to their needs, where buildings have an incredible role to play. Now, zooming in into particularly what the needs that they are flagging for us are when it comes to building and housing in particular. So from one side, they need support. They would like to have more capacity, more knowledge, and more active connection to solutions that relate to how to turn their building and the housing to a more sustainable one. They have this overarching goal of decarbonization, strategies that need to have buildings at the core, but also the need to interplay with the rest of the urban ecosystem and the rest of the urban infrastructures. So that's the first challenge. How, for example, can we utilize digital solutions to better understand where to improve some of the buildings that we have within our cities? How do they overlay and they overlap, for example, with areas that need additional help in terms of green solution, green spaces, nature-based solutions? Which areas are more at risk of flooding? Which areas is where we have more low-income population? How can we use these technologies to make this more integrated planning happening? Materials and solutions, and know what is the available opportunity there, is also something that they strive to learn better. And we already heard quite a bit about the importance of connecting to energy efficiency, more clean energy provision, and circularity of the materials that are being implemented. Resilient is the second important pillar of what they would like to receive support on, and of course, very much interconnected with sustainability and with decarbonization. How do we make our building more responsive to the challenges of climate change, but at the same time, how do we make sure that they are safe and they are comfortable for our citizens? Cooling poverty is something that it's increasing across the world, where a lot of people can't afford to cool their homes. And with the rising temperature, this is something that will become increasingly a division point between different parts of our society. And it links to the very important third pillar of affordability. How do we make sure that we are deploying these solutions at a scale that allows all of our citizens to benefit of these solutions? And most of all, how do we make sure that this becomes some of the by default criteria in our procurement? It was mentioned a few times before as an important instrument that we can utilize. I want to conclude just by highlighting one single point. Across the board, when we talk about innovation and some of these incredible solutions that are being developed, tested, and sometimes are moving slowly but steadily at scale, it's very often these solutions are also linked to the idea that they are very costly for local governments that are trying to do this procurement in a more sustainable manner, but also very costly for our citizens that we are trying to help embark in this journey and this trajectory to make their home more livable. So I think the important piece for us as a mission right now is to understand how can we learn what solutions are already there, how can we learn how to deploy this solution and to make sure that they land in the hands of those cities that are interested in making use of them to improve the quality of housing in their own communities. But most of all, how do we pass the message that sustainable doesn't necessarily mean more costly? So I look forward to continuing to learn from all of you, but also to continue exchanging engaging with this community and to see how can we make innovative, less costly, and more sustainable for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Georgia. Very insightful. And I think, thank you for that snapshot of this initiative. Our next segment will focus on 2 case studies now that bring the discussion to the actual implementation by cities and countries of the types of solutions we've been discussing this morning. For the first city case, we will move to Cascais, Portugal, to learn how the Living Lab is experimenting with innovative solutions. We welcome João Diniz, Climate Action Director from Cascais. João is a visionary advocate for sustainable cities dedicated to creating urban environments that prioritize comfort and ecological health. His projects are rooted in co-design, bringing together stakeholders and citizens to ensure that their shared vision as active co-owners of the communities are reflected in the buildings. By fostering sustainability and supporting vulnerable populations, João's work promotes inclusive development while respecting the city's environmental technologies and understanding how they can grow and adapt. This conversation will invite us to understand how to bridge innovation with this nature-based solutions. So João, welcome to the webinar. Please let us know, the floor is yours to talk to us about the successful case study in Cascais.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm truly honored to share our expertise and our experiences, but also our learnings through this process of innovation, which is, as you know, quite disruptive because we do work with living labs, and instead of simultaneously trying many different solutions on a laboratory, we have to try them directly in the real world with people around us. So we have to do it jointly. That's obviously a challenge. I will share my screen, and I would please ask you if you could confirm that you can see my presentation.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So I will talk about the living labs and the decarbonization process that we have here. First of all, let me just share some round numbers of our little corner in the world, which is the city of Cascais, where we are located in the outskirts of the Lisbon metropolitan region. We are approximately 100 square kilometers, where 1/3 is protected landscape, and the other 2/3 are surrounded by the ocean. So it's a wonderful place to live, as you can imagine, where we have lots of natural and cultural heritage interconnected with each other. We were quite pioneers when we were working with climate action. So we were the first Portuguese municipality to have both a climate change strategy at local level, but also a climate action plan for adaptation, but carbon neutrality roadmap for 2050 following the Paris Agreement and the Portuguese government's commitment. So we were the first ones to say, yes, yes, we can, and yes, we do. So when it comes to adaptation, which I will not focus, but it's worth the mention, is we work a lot with nature-based solutions or green solutions according to the European adaptation strategy. And what we do is we work with the city to make sure that the ecosystem services are restored so they can preserve their natural functions in safeguarding our livelihood. So this way we reduce vulnerabilities and we reduce risks, obviously, while adding cross benefits to citizens, such as green spaces, natural areas, better quality of air, and wind flow to keep us cool on hot days, for example. So there's plenty of things that we do on that scope, but also when it comes to capacitation, so building awareness, skills, and we do that through training with schools, with families in your household, but also through art and with some innovative features as well. So then we have the Carbon Neutrality Roadmap 2050. What is it about? I will have to skip this through, otherwise I'll spend more than 15 minutes that I have. But basically, we started with our carbon accounting back in 2015, where we had roughly over 500 kilotons of CO2 equivalent of emissions. And now we have to reduce that to 11 kilotons of CO2 emissions. And why is that? Because remember, we do have 1/3 of our territory as a protected landscape. And even so, it only responds to a small fraction of our carbon sink needs. So obviously we need to work at a global scale, but we also need to work and assume our responsibilities in reducing our emissions and enhancing our energy efficiency at the same time. How do we do this? How do we bring innovation in living labs? Well, a lot of the presentations, the previous presentations that I've seen were actually quite interesting on that, as they probably focus on innovative features, as we could see, for example, on the data centers and many other examples. What we're trying to do is, if there's a stakeholder, let's say a business or stakeholder or an innovative company or someone in the private or even public sector from Portugal or anywhere in the world that has a solution that is quite new and it's not yet market ready, we invite them to test their solution in a real environment because we see value of it. And of course, we are partners, let's say commercial partners in the solution, even though we're not interested in the financial gains of it, we are interested in the impact that it has. So what this does is accelerate the adoption of new technologies. And of course, we get positive feedback that allow us to fine-tune the solution and understand where the market is accelerating and where the market is asking questions and has more doubts about it. So we obviously have this to go through. We've been trying gamification, different incentives, anything that brings or merges the stakeholder that brings innovation and the citizen that asks for that innovation. So this is about technology bringing benefits for communities. And these are, from our learnings, two types of benefits. Environmental, because it enhances our quality of life, but also financial, because it saves us money as families, as city managers, whatever. So this is the gains of efficiency that we're looking there. And of course, like I mentioned, this is the shared risk that we're trying to achieve. I'll give you a quick example of what we're doing. Basically, energy communities. Energy communities are now within the European framework of energy, and they're promoting energy communities as a good solution. However, legally, it's quite a hassle for us to go through with this. So we are trying with the European city facility, for example, we evaluated the gains. What does it mean that we actually promote an energy community where you as a homeowner or you as a plant owner or someone that has your own infrastructure could either buy or rent your rooftop with solar panels and make sure that you understand the gains that you get from it. And even on a weekend or even when you're not home, you can forward that energy for someone else, your neighbor, a local company to charge your neighbor's car. These are new business models, completely new from what we have from a centralized energy system. And of course, it's quite disruptive. And there's a few people who really want this, but they don't know how to get it. And there's some people that actually, they're not quite keen on this. So what's our role? Our role is to make sure that everybody's aware on how to promote this. They get themselves energy literacy. And then we have the others who don't see this as a positive outcome to change their business model and to accommodate these new energy renewable systems. So it's this type of innovation that we try to do, which is quite tailor-made, but we have learned that once it's made, it's highly replicable for any city with the same demographics or the same level of development. And even cities that are smaller or bigger in size, they can all replicate this. Another example that I want to share with you is the Cascais Smart Pole. So within a square that we call Junqueiro and a campus university and all the residential area, where we tried decarbonization on many levels. So if you look at your individual carbon footprint, you'll understand that most of your emissions are related to your electricity use, so your stationary energy, but also your mobility. And then there's a significant portion as well on your water consumption, on your waste production. So why can't we tackle these solutions for your daily life? And they can be fine-tuned for your preferences or your needs. So what is that about? Cascais Smart Pole is about being smart. It's about making an innovation lighthouse that tests these solutions. And they can be more or less complicated as depends on the experience of each city manager. For example, when it comes for the campus university, we have installed solar panels, but we are not allowed to install any more solar panels. So where are we getting this energy? Well, we're getting from other schools and other infrastructures nearby where we are fostering this through energy community. For example, if we are collecting waste with our waste trucks, and they run with diesel and they go there every day because we have to collect the waste, why don't you help us? Why don't you place your oil, your used kitchen oil, in a special bin, which is the orange container over there, and we will collect it, and then we will transform it into biodiesel, and then we will use it in our own collection trucks, making a circular economy model at local scale with a very good defined local border. And with that, we reduced 85% of our emissions just on that. And then we have the quite innovative Mobi Qashqai program, which is a free public bus mobility as a service where you can also rent bikes. But what if you're using the car, and instead of using your car, you use the bike or you use the bus? So we have a gamification app that tracks you, if you want, of course, what happens if you choose these methods. And after a month, how much CO2 emissions do you save? And if you reach the thresholds and you're under the individual threshold for your carbon neutrality, or at least to reduce 50% or 60% of your emissions as we would wish for, then you'd get an award or a prize that you can redeem, which is something for your sustainable livelihood once again. And then again on green spaces. So Qashqai is quite fond of nice green spaces. Everyone is. And remember, we're located by the coast, so we have a lot of tourism here. Why are we in a dry environment, in a very where water scarcity is a problem, still having lawns? And one of the things that we've done is that we removed a lot of these green areas that require a lot of water, and we transformed them with biodiverse plants that not only promote biodiversity, but they are more efficient in terms of water needs. And if we did that, we'd be heavily criticized, right? So why don't you, our resident, help us with that? Help us choose the plants according to the plant's needs and their biodiversity promotion, and then help us to plant them. So now you can actually foster this information and further it to other citizens. This is something that we're doing as well. Of course, this can move forward, like, for example, with our inclusive energy community, where we are bringing, once again, the vulnerable communities, most vulnerable to climate change as well, especially in the mitigation, for example, with colder heat days, where we forward this energy, the excess of energy, for free for households that are registered as in need, up to a given amount of energy per year, let's say 100 kilowatts per month, sorry, which is a lot. And this way, we reduce their carbon emissions, and we are providing a social service that is also crucial. And this innovation ecosystem is also supported by the European Union, which is the same model that UTM uses, which was trying to merge stakeholders from different sectors worldwide, both in financing, technology providers, SMEs, cities, and even grassroots organizations, where we are trying to promote an innovative ecosystem that proves that these solutions are the most efficient. And of course, we have quite a few, as you can see from the logos of each project. But let me just run really quickly. For example, we have Data Seller and Comunitas, where we learn with the citizens. If we want to act on energy efficiency, you need us to give us your data, your information of consumptions, so we can fine-tune the solutions that you need in your household or in your neighborhood or in your city. It doesn't matter the scale. And then we have communities. So for example, well, if you have the data or not, at least you'll have the energy literacy where we can create a scenario of savings for you. And obviously we needed external partners to develop this, both in terms of technology, but also reaching out for citizens and promote this energy literacy. Klimaboro, for example, brings us innovative solutions when it comes to public procurement. As most of you know, it's quite the hassle. So Klimaboro brings us innovative public procurement for one sector, in our case, it's waste, where we are trying to develop a textile waste collection system that is more efficient for the collection, but also more grateful for the citizens who give their clothes for recycling or reuse. And why is this important? Because we've learned that most of the household waste that we have, the contamination of that, is textile, because people already separate plastic, paper, metal, and glass, but they don't separate the textile. So we're trying to, once again, create a living lab that allow us to test solutions to promote these goals. And they've been doing so well. And now we're on the pilot scale. We went from the pilot scale to the scale up model. We're going through the municipality, and we are sharing this with many other cities. So this is a highly replicable model. And if you hear what I'm saying so far, you understand that, well, we can do that too. Yes, you can. There's no one who can't do that. And finally, the we generate, where we are also once again investing in an energy shared system in an existing urban area. So when we talk about energy efficiency and new mobility patterns, we usually talk about the newest parts of cities, but we need to refurbish the old ones. That's the challenge because we need to change habits and we need to change the way people move around their city or their neighborhood. And usually we see this is not about technology necessarily. This is more about communication and reaching out. So of course we have this and other projects where we are merging stakeholders, private stakeholders who are giving, let's say, social media information for about each citizen, and we are meeting people with the same, for example, energy pattern. So for example, if I'm staying outside during the day because I'm working, but you're doing your homework, working from home, then I can sell you energy. And then this model just connects us together so we can, shake hands and let's do business here together as citizens. And of course, we need private stakeholders for this. So at a glance, what I mean to share with you is that we are trying to have a 2030 and 2050 resilient city, but we need to understand we need to transform the way that we work, that we develop our innovation, but also we aim to regenerate our city. So everybody wins with this. And you can start with a little roundabout, you can go to the neighborhood or a school, and then you can go to the whole city and eventually the continent. Thanks to our partners worldwide and our networks that we've already seen them sharing here the information, we've been doing that quite successfully. So that's about it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Joao, for this excellent example. For me, what sticks out the most is this entrepreneurial approach you have to testing solutions and actively involving the citizens, creating a community where innovation can fully thrive. So it's excellent. Thank you. Now, following that, we now turn to the country case of Chile. We welcome Matias Rios Enriquez. Matias is the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Coordinator at Corfo Biobío, where he drives the development of regional ecosystems focused on innovation, technology transfer, and the growth of emerging enterprises. His work brings together public, private, and academic actors to accelerate solutions that address the productive and territorial challenges of Southern Chile. Welcome, Matias.
Hola Marta, buenas tardes a todos
Hola.
los que están conectados todavía, 102 participantes. Oye, ¿ahí se ve bien la presentación? Sí.
Sí.
Ok, súper bien. Ok, hoy día les vengo a presentar un trabajo que es muy importante para el desarrollo de Chile y sobre todo para la región del Biobío. Chile es un país pequeño en el contexto latinoamericano, somos 18 millones de habitantes más o menos, y yo les hablo desde una región del sur de Chile, que el sur en realidad considerando la capital está un poco al norte, que es Santiago. Concepción y la región del Biobío están al sur de la capital, pero somos el centro geográfico de Chile. Chile es un país muy largo, que tiene el desierto más árido del mundo en el norte, y tiene la Patagonia y la conexión con los hielos eternos en el sur. Entonces, muy diverso, tanto en geografía como en personas. Y esto tiene un impacto también en el habitar, digamos, en el habitar y en la construcción y en cómo estamos pensando las soluciones de construcción para habitar en el futuro. Entonces, en específico, les vengo a hablar de el Programa Estratégico Regional Biobío Madera, que ese es su nombre corto. El nombre largo es Métodos Modernos de Construcción Sostenible en Madera, y de este trabajo que hemos estado haciendo de plataforma de productos para una construcción sostenible. Entonces, voy a ir bien ágil hoy día, les voy a hablar un poquito primero del contexto para que entiendan de qué estamos hablando, cuál es el problema. Después, luego les voy a hablar de la gobernanza de este Programa Estratégico Regional de Biobío Madera. Luego el modelo inicial de prefabricación que pensamos en Chile que podía funcionar. Luego lo que estamos intentando implementar ahora, esta plataforma de producto, y finalizando para hablarles de un caso muy específico de un piloto de pequeño condominio con esta solución de plataforma de producto. Entonces, lo primero que les cuento es que, ya lo decían en otra presentación, bueno, el déficit habitacional es enorme, nosotros somos un país pequeño, pero aún así las cifras no están, hay cifras gubernamentales, también hay cifras de ONGs, y todas rondan entre 550.000 y 750.000 viviendas de déficit total en el país. Es un tremendo número para nosotros, y más o menos 1.200.000 viviendas con requerimientos de reparación. Nosotros ahí en el gráfico somos la región del Biobío, con unas 6.000 o 7.000 viviendas que requieren trabajo. Como les decía, este déficit es muy diverso, y todos los actores consideran que es un déficit que en definitiva todavía está subvalorado. Lo más probable es que sea más el déficit. Estos son los números más oficiales que tenemos. Y aun cuando en definitiva el país ha ido desarrollándose y el ingreso per cápita ha aumentado, el costo de la vivienda ha aumentado mucho más que los ingresos en los últimos 20 o 30 años. Por lo tanto, la brecha se hace cada vez más grande, y por lo tanto es cada vez más difícil acceder a una vivienda en Chile, sobre todo en las zonas urbanas, que es donde se concentra la mayoría de la población. Lo segundo importante es que Chile es un país que tiene aproximadamente 18 millones de hectáreas de bosques. De esos 18 millones de hectáreas de bosque, aproximadamente entre 2 y 2,5 millones de hectáreas son de lo que llamamos la masa forestal productiva, que en definitiva son bosques no nativos, y principalmente estamos hablando mayoritariamente de pinos radiata y Eucalyptus globulus initans, que están muy vinculados con una industria muy grande en el sur de Chile, que es la industria forestal y celulosa. Se requieren grandes volúmenes de esta masa forestal para poder responder a los requerimientos de celulosa, de las astillas, de los tableros, de los postipolines, papel y cartón, y por supuesto de madera cerrada. Ahora, el tema es que, aunque nosotros producimos en los últimos años, debe andar alrededor de los 8 millones de metros cúbicos de madera cerrada. Esta madera cerrada principalmente se utiliza de manera básica, es un commodity, y se le agrega poco valor. Como se le agrega poco valor en el territorio y se transforma más bien en un producto de exportación, la industria forestal y la industria celulosa tiene un nivel de tensión social relativamente alto en los territorios donde opera. Y es porque en definitiva no se ha logrado transformar este gran desarrollo industrial en una mejora efectiva en las condiciones del vivir de las personas de esos territorios. Entonces, en la tabla que coloco ahí, se ve que la producción total nacional de madera cerrada es enorme. Estamos alrededor de 8 millones de metros cúbicos actualmente. La producción de madera cerrada para uso estructural, eh, alrededor de un 10% de eso, son unos 800.000, 900.000 metros cúbicos de madera, lo que significa que en realidad todo el resto es no estructural. Pero después hay una siguiente clasificación, que es lo que llamamos madera aserrada estructural clasificada, en nuestras siglas MAE, y esta madera es la que efectivamente cumple con los requerimientos para entrar a la construcción. Entonces uno podría preguntarse, ya, pero como hay una que entra a la construcción y otra que es de uso estructural, y es porque en definitiva hay una enorme cantidad de madera que se utiliza para la construcción, pero que no cumple con los requisitos que estableció Chile para entrar a la construcción. Y eso es un problema actualmente, y es un problema vinculado bueno, con varios aspectos. Uno de ellos es que en la historia de Chile la construcción en madera ha estado más que nada vinculado con los estratos de bajos ingresos, y con el sur de Chile, donde había y hay todavía mucha madera. Y en Chile se ocupa la denominación de casa de material para referirse a las casas de albañilería o que involucren cemento. Esas son las casas de material. Y por lo tanto, lo que no es material es el resto, es la madera u otras soluciones. Entonces, la madera ha tenido que ir ingresando con dificultad a los grandes mercados inmobiliarios del país, y en realidad hoy día está más que nada reducida a la vivienda que llamamos vivienda social, que es la vivienda subsidiada por el Estado, y por otro lado las viviendas de autoconstrucción de bajos ingresos. Ese es el segmento. Por eso es que es tan pequeño el número de madera aserrada estructural clasificada comparado con la fabricación total de madera en el país. Otro tema importante de contexto es que Chile tiene una ley hace poquísimo tiempo, unos, 3 años atrás, hace poco tiempo, una ley marco de cambio climático. ¿Por qué es sumamente importante? Es porque en esta ley se refiere a muchos aspectos, pero el principal que quiero traer hoy día es que nosotros nos comprometemos al año 2050 a ser carbono neutral. Y esta ley marco baja hacia unas estrategias y luego hacia unas hojas de ruta que tienen que establecer cada uno de los sectores para identificar cómo lo va a lograr en diferentes niveles de que al 2030 y luego del 2030 al 2050 para llegar a la carbono neutralidad. Y ya lo hablaron varios de mis colegas anteriormente, la construcción es uno de los principales emisores, por lo tanto, ¿cómo lo va a lograr la construcción? A la vez de cómo resuelve otros problemas sistémicos, es un gran desafío. Y en definitiva, el problema que tenemos hoy día, ya sabíamos que tenemos un gran déficit, sabemos que tenemos la madera disponible en el país y sabemos que tenemos este marco regulatorio de carbono neutralidad al 2050. Sin embargo, ya lo han mencionado mis colegas también antes, la construcción tiene problemas crónicos ya de productividad. La productividad total de los factores solo ha ido disminuyendo en los últimos años. Nosotros somos el penúltimo país con peor productividad de la construcción de la OCDE. Las emisiones de la construcción son enormes y la composición de los residuos, nuestras estadísticas dicen que por cada 9 pisos construidos se genera un piso completo de residuos, lo que es una tremenda cantidad de residuos, y todo esto vinculado con el formato actual de la construcción, que ya igual se comentó varias veces, que es en definitiva una industria artesanal. No es una industria equivalente a la manufactura, sino que es una industria artesanal y por lo tanto tiene una serie de problemáticas vinculadas con ello, que la tienen en una condición complicada hoy día en Chile, además de los vaivenes propios del mercado nacional. Es complicado el surgimiento de nuevas grandes empresas de la construcción porque los márgenes son cada vez más pequeños en el contexto de reducciones crónicas de la productividad. Entonces, en este contexto es que hace ya 2 años y medio atrás, el Comité de Desarrollo Productivo Regional, que es el brazo de la Corfo, a quien yo represento en la región del Biobío, definió la relevancia de poder establecer una gobernanza regional que permitiera trabajar la agregación de valor de la madera a través de la construcción. Entonces se establece un programa estratégico regional financiado por la Corfo para poder vincular y coordinar a los actores relevantes del ecosistema de manera que pudiéramos avanzar sistemáticamente hacia la construcción de viviendas y de edificaciones en madera de alto estándar. Por un lado, impactando a toda la industria del aserrío, por supuesto impactando a la industria forestal, impactando en el déficit, reduciendo los riesgos laborales, reduciendo la huella de carbono y mejorando la productividad. Entonces, no solamente se trata de incorporar maderas, y por eso es que el programa estratégico se llama Métodos Modernos de Construcción Sostenible en Madera. En definitiva, es incorporando métodos de construcción sostenible, métodos modernos de construcción en el proceso, de manera a hacernos cargo de la productividad y también de los problemas ambientales y de seguridad en un solo paquete de soluciones. Esta gobernanza tiene un consejo directivo, un comité ejecutivo que es el que se reúne continuamente, hay un presidente y este presidente nosotros lo que buscamos es que siempre sea un representante del mundo privado, de manera de poder pensar en una sostenibilidad del programa. Los programas estratégicos regionales tienen una duración de 10 años, nosotros hemos terminado el año 2. Y luego después hay un equipo técnico y comités gestores por área. Es decir, en este caso lo que vemos más abajo en la imagen, cada uno de los ejes transversales tiene un comité gestor específico que trabaja aquello que se requiere en ese eje transversal. Además hay un gerente que es el que organiza todas las actividades y que permite la coordinación completa de cada uno de los actos. Entonces, para iniciar el trabajo de este programa estratégico, lo que se definió fueron una serie de ejes estratégicos que tienen más que nada que ver con los aspectos técnicos de la edificación, es decir, partimos con una vivienda en madera de 1 o 2 pisos, que es la solución más sencilla, luego viviendas de 3 a 6 pisos, luego edificación en altura, edificación en madera no residencial, es decir, estamos hablando del público, privado, cualquiera no residencial, y viviendas ya de más de 7 pisos, que es el último de los ejes. Y cada uno de estos ejes está atravesado por temáticas de capital humano, que nosotros, aunque tenemos cierto nivel de capacitación en el uso de la madera, no en los métodos modernos de construcción, hay aspectos de normativa, regulación y certificación clave para poder avanzar, sobre todo considerando las presiones del mercado. Hoy día el mercado de la celulosa presiona mucho los precios y por lo tanto a las empresas de las forestales no siempre les conviene entrar con productos que para el rubro de la construcción, sino que avanzar hacia la celulosa. El tema del suministro de materias primas también es importante, aunque tenemos una gran cobertura forestal actual. Lo que ha ido pasando en los últimos años es que se ha ido reduciendo, también producto del cambio climático. Hay un punto muy relevante, el financiamiento y el fomento tanto de la oferta como de la demanda, que es lo que voy a hablar un poco más adelante. Por supuesto, aspectos de difusión y promoción, y finalmente el conjunto completo de fomentar la gobernanza y la institucionalidad de manera que esto sea sostenible más allá de los 10 años de financiamiento que tiene el programa. Entonces, se conforma este programa estratégico, y a la par que se estaba conformando el programa estratégico, un poco antes, el Gobierno Nacional de Chile define un modelo para enfrentar la problemática de la construcción. Y este modelo es un modelo de prefabricación. El tema es que el modelo de prefabricación que se utilizó inicialmente y que se utiliza todavía en Chile tiene que ver se define de esta manera. Está el Ministerio de Vivienda y Urbanismo, que estableció una serie de decretos, entre ellos un decreto que define qué es una prefabricadora, de qué se trata y qué aspectos tiene que cumplir necesariamente una prefabricadora, y luego requiere que esa prefabricadora diseñe previamente una serie de viviendas que pueden ser prefabricadas y que se llaman viviendas industrializadas tipo, que tiene que ser ingresado al sistema público. El sistema público identifica si la va a aceptar o no, y si es que acepta, queda disponible como un modelo para ser utilizado por por cualquier proveedor del Estado, digamos. Esta prefabricadora entonces tiene que cumplir primero con los aspectos de transformarse en una industria prefabricadora, y por tanto tiene que tener una inversión productiva alta. Estamos hablando de inversiones productivas entre 10 y 15 millones de dólares para que se cumplan todos los aspectos que el Gobierno Nacional de Chile había considerado relevantes. Entonces, y además les cuento que, muy a grosso modo, porque esto es algo medio complejo en el ensamblaje institucional en Chile, pero el Ministerio de Vivienda tiene subsidios para la construcción de viviendas sociales, pero el intermediario se llama entidad patrocinante, que es una especie de inmobiliaria social, y la entidad patrocinante es quien coordina con la constructora la construcción propiamente tal del grupo de vivienda o la vivienda individual. Entonces, ¿cuál fue el efecto de este esquema? El efecto de este esquema es que las pymes quedaron fuera. Quedaron fuera por razones evidentes, que es que una inversión de entre 10 y 15 millones de dólares era imposible para cualquier pyme, y que además, como les comentaba, la prefabricadora o la entidad patrocinante, cualquiera de los dos, tiene que ingresar estas viviendas industrializadas tipo previamente al sistema. Y eso requiere inversión también, inversión y capacidad humana para poder desarrollar esos diseños, pensando en la manufactura, que no es la forma como normalmente la arquitectura ni la ingeniería civil en Chile funcionan. No diseñan para la fabricación, diseñan para la construcción artesanal, que es lo típico. Entonces, dada esta situación, lo que se propuso desde el programa estratégico regional fue un enfoque distinto que tuviera en consideración a las pymes, que era lo relevante para nosotros, por varios motivos. Entonces, sigue estando el Ministerio de Vivienda y Urbanismo, sigue estando la entidad patrocinante y la constructora. Sin embargo, se configura una plataforma de producto, es decir, que hasta ahora es más que nada un repositorio de componentes para la construcción. Estos componentes permiten que varias prefabricadoras, N prefabricadoras, puedan tomar estos componentes y especializarse en la fabricación de un tipo de componentes. ¿Por qué es importante? Es porque en el sistema anterior, o que todavía está funcionando, el sistema de la única prefabricadora grande, la prefabricadora tiene que prefabricar toda la vivienda, lo que significa que de nuevo requiere capacidades amplias. En nuestro modelo, en el modelo que estamos promoviendo actualmente, cada prefabricadora puede ser especializada en un tipo de componente. Un tipo de componente de suelo, un tipo de componente vertical u otro tipo de componentes. De esa manera alcanza optimizaciones por economías de escala, pero además sus capacidades técnicas y técnicas humanas y técnicas de infraestructura le permiten efectivamente llegar a esos niveles sin inversiones productivas enormes. Estamos hablando que nosotros hemos calculado que las inversiones productivas para poder alcanzar estos niveles por una pyme deberían andar entre 50.000 y 100.000 dólares, no más que eso, para poder alcanzarlo. Y justamente esos niveles de inversión entre 50.000 y 100.000 dólares son los niveles de inversión que la Corfo, por otro de sus instrumentos, puede ayudar a financiar a cada una de las pymes. Entonces, el objetivo es que, por un lado, las entidades patrocinantes utilicen esta plataforma de productos y en los listados de componentes estandarizados para el diseño, facilitando el diseño. Y por otro lado, las prefabricadoras, una vez que se identifique un negocio específico con un requerimiento del Estado, en este caso el Ministerio de Vivienda y Urbanismo, puedan tomar de la misma plataforma de producto los componentes y inicien la fabricación en cada una de sus industrias. Y entreguen luego los componentes estandarizados a la constructora. Configurando en definitiva un modelo que es distribuido, porque las pymes están distribuidas en el territorio, no están todas en un solo lugar, resiliente principalmente considerando que Chile es un país en el que ocurren una serie de fenómenos naturales de forma muy recurrente. Nosotros tenemos el abanico completo, creo que lo único que nos falta son los huracanes y ocurren comúnmente, por lo tanto es muy importante que estas unidades productivas estén distribuidas de manera que si ocurre un fenómeno natural complejo, la red de respuesta es resiliente en definitiva y que sea territorialmente equitativo, que también es muy importante, de manera de desconcentrar los esfuerzos productivos y por lo tanto las ventajas económicas, que no todas ocurran en las zonas metropolitanas más comunes de Chile. Hasta aquí suena bien, pero nosotros estamos avanzando efectivamente en el desarrollo de esto. Entonces, hace ya un año atrás, el comité financió el desarrollo de esta plataforma de productos. El primer ciclo de desarrollo de esta plataforma de productos, que se llama Plataforma Blocus, está en beta todavía. Ustedes se pueden ingresar a plataformablocus.cl, está ahí el link, y pueden ver que efectivamente están los listados completos de componentes y los listados se pueden bajar en distintos formatos para poder ser utilizados componente por componente. Son una gran cantidad de componentes, todavía están en proceso de mejora, pero la idea es que con este set de componentes ocurra que se estandaricen los procesos, pero además que no se restrinjan las posibilidades creativas del diseño. Era algo muy importante porque en el modelo de industrialización de una sola gran industria, lo más eficiente para esa gran industria siempre va a ser construir la misma casa. Es más o menos evidente, siempre va a ser lo mejor en términos económicos construir la misma casa, porque entonces no tengo que hacer ninguna variación en mi línea productiva y tengo economías de escala. En este caso, como hay distintas unidades productivas siendo componentes, el diseñador o el ensamblador de las partes puede tener más libertad creativa y utilizar los componentes de diferentes formas para llegar a soluciones distintas. Esto está también descrito en la misma plataforma blocus.cl. Ahí yo coloqué solamente 2 viviendas de la serie de viviendas que están disponibles. Son 2 viviendas de uso diferente, un rural y semirural, y que están construidas con el mismo set de componentes, en definitiva, para demostrar que es posible llegar a estas soluciones diversas en diversos territorios. Como les decía, Chile es extremadamente diverso, no podemos pensar en una solución para el desierto y otra para la Patagonia que sea la misma solución, no tendría ningún sentido. Y por lo tanto están disponibles y esta plataforma de productos ya está funcionando Y no solamente está funcionando en ese sentido, sino que está funcionando, y con el último punto que les quiero traer, en lo que llamamos el piloto del pequeño condominio. Este es un esquema un poquito más complejo porque es algo más cercano a la realidad de las conexiones que estamos realizando hoy día para poder trabajar. En el núcleo de coordinación está el Comité de Desarrollo Productivo Regional del Biobío, está el Programa Estratégico Regional, y también el Serviu Biobío, que es el Servicio de Vivienda y Urbanismo, que es el brazo ejecutor del Ministerio para la realización de las viviendas. Y entonces lo que hicimos en este caso para poder acelerar el proceso es que, como ya teníamos el set de componentes en esta plataforma Blocus, lo que nos faltaba era el diseño, y las entidades patrocinantes inicialmente no tenían mucha motivación para poder utilizar el set de componentes, porque ellos no están acostumbrados a diseñar con mucho detalle en etapas tempranas, porque en etapas tempranas no reciben financiamiento del ministerio. Como no reciben financiamiento, entonces intentan reducir los costos lo más posible. Ese es su objetivo. Entonces lo que hicimos fue pedir, en el contexto de un préstamo que ya está firmado con el Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo, se financió a través de una cooperación técnica el diseño de un conjunto de viviendas, de 5 viviendas, por una oficina de arquitectura llamada Punto Cero, utilizando los componentes. Esa era la idea, utilizar los componentes, utilizar esta plataforma de productos que estaba alimentada por 2 universidades locales, por la Universidad de San Sebastián y la Universidad de Concepción, y que luego ese resultado fuera un diseño de proyecto que siempre tenía que estar en coordinación tanto con nosotros como por el servicio de vivienda. Este diseño de vivienda se le entregó a la entidad patrocinante, que estaba en comunicación con las familias, con las 5 familias. Como dato anexo, las 5 familias elegidas son familias de mujeres jefas de hogar, algo muy común en Chile, y estas 5 viviendas están en un sector de altísima plusvalía en el Concepción Metropolitano, en la región del Biobío. Entonces, la idea es que en que estamos ahora, en que las pymes fabricantes están reconociendo los componentes, y estamos a puertas del proyecto, ya fue aprobado para su financiamiento, estamos a puertas de que inicie la fabricación en las pymes. En este caso van a ser 2 pymes para reducir el nivel de riesgo. Estas 2 pymes van a fabricar distintos tipos de componentes, y luego estos componentes estructurales de madera van a llegar a una constructora, que es la que va a hacer una parte de la obra efectivamente en terreno y otra parte de la obra con los componentes estructurales, digamos. Toda la estructura va a venir en componentes, y el resto, todas las terminaciones y las obras de habilitación del territorio, del terreno, van a ser en sitio, digamos. ¿Qué es lo que esperamos? ¿Y por qué hicimos esto? Es porque, en definitiva, acá nosotros ya teníamos suficiente información y suficiente experiencia para saber que los aspectos técnicos de la construcción con entramado ligero en madera funcionan. Esa no es la hipótesis, no era la hipótesis a responder, si es que la construcción en madera funcionaba. También sabemos que la construcción prefabricada reduce costos en obra, reduce los tiempos de montaje en el terreno, eso ya lo sabíamos. Lo que no sabíamos es si es que efectivamente podemos hacer que varias pymes lleguen a un acuerdo en calidad, en definitiva, que es lo más importante, que podamos llegar con la misma calidad, de manera que no tengamos problemas de fit con los distintos componentes una vez que lleguen a terreno. Eso es sumamente importante. Estas viviendas están emplazadas en un lugar de alta plusvalía, como les decía. Estas son las plantas de primer y segundo piso. Es un sistema de viviendas en tren, son 5 viviendas que tienen algunos aspectos muy similares y otros diferentes. El conjunto de estas 5 viviendas, más la habilitación completa, las conexiones eléctricas, alcantarillado de aguas, todo el proyecto, en definitiva, excepto el costo del terreno, que el terreno lo colocó el Servicio de Vivienda y Urbanismo. Todo el costo es de aproximadamente $400.000, que es el costo común de este tipo de proyectos, en definitiva. ¿Por qué es importante? Porque lo que estamos hablando es que con este tipo de soluciones que son sostenibles, no estamos aumentando el costo para el Estado de la entrega de las viviendas. De ese total de dinero, aproximadamente un cuarto del presupuesto tiene que ver con el aspecto estructural, es decir, con los componentes. Estamos hablando de unos $100.000 para las 5 viviendas. Son viviendas cada una de entre 59 y 61 metros cuadrados, lo que está en el tope superior de los criterios establecidos por el Ministerio para la Vivienda Social, pero nosotros tenemos completa confianza de que este tipo de soluciones son las importantes porque a la vez que se posiciona la construcción con métodos modernos en madera, permiten a las personas, a las familias más vulnerables tener acceso a soluciones dignas habitacionales, que es sumamente importante para que este tipo de iniciativas, de estos programas estratégicos, tengan sostenibilidad en el tiempo y tengan legitimidad, y de esta manera podamos ir resolviendo los temas más críticos que afrontamos tanto en Chile como en Latinoamérica. Finalmente yo los quería invitar, definitivamente, cualquiera que esté interesado. Yo ahí dejé todas mis coordenadas, mi correo y mi teléfono para que cualquiera que tenga alguna duda me pueda escribir, me pueda llamar, mandar un WhatsApp. Y si es que alguien quiere venir a ver cómo está sucediendo esto acá, también es totalmente invitado. Hace poco tiempo, yo diría 1 o 2 meses, vino una delegación de Colombia a poder identificar qué es lo que estábamos haciendo. Y para nosotros también es súper importante porque entonces aprendemos de lo que está ocurriendo en otros territorios, que yo diría que es uno de los aspectos más importantes de este tipo de iniciativas también, pues, poder reconocer los aprendizajes que ocurren a nivel latinoamericano. Así que muchas gracias, espero les haya servido y que puedan seguir conociendo del mundo de las plataformas de productos para la vivienda.
Thank you, Matthias. Indeed, a recurrent topic during this morning has been the importance of adapting housing to local context. And I think your example in Chile provides a very different and interesting approach to focusing on processes to enable this flexibility to adapt the design, and also creating impact in the SMEs that participate along the value chain. So congratulations and thanks for sharing your data. I'm sure a lot of the audience will appreciate and contact you with further questions. So with this, we're ending our second session of the webinar. Thank you all for joining us today for the second session of Housing 2.0, New Perspectives for Latin America and the Caribbean. Over the past 2 hours, we've explored how innovation in systems and construction models is reshaping what is possible for the future of housing, both technologically, environmentally, and socially. Today's conversation highlighted something essential, that innovation is not only about developing new tools or materials, but also about collaborating and finding new ways of regulating, financing, and imagining what dignified, sustainable, and inclusive housing can look like for a region. So before we close, we want to invite you to stay tuned for our third webinar coming up on January 28th. The future is already here. How do we design, build, and inhabit with algorithms? This next session will explore how artificial intelligence, generative design, and algorithmic models are redefining how we shape housing, from planning and materials to new forms of inhabiting. So it promises to be another fascinating conversation at the frontier of technology and urban innovation. Well, we look forward to seeing you there, and we really appreciate your time and participation in today's session. Thank you very much.